Want to learn the basics for airbrushing? Stick around. Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to Learning to Airbrush. I'm going to give you the basics for the beginner guys so you can pick these little techniques up to help you along the way and get you started on some practicing, because airbrushing is all about trigger control. You have to get your trigger control dialed in. We can all pick an airbrush up and use it like an aerosol can, press the trigger, pull it back and get loads of paint down, and you think you're airbrushing, but you're not. You've got to get that trigger control mastered. If you're using a double action airbrush, which we've got here, so for this demonstration I'm using the Creos PS270. This is a double action airbrush on a 0.2 needle nozzle setup. It's a great, I'd say, beginner's brush to start off with. Most people say beginners shouldn't be starting off with a 0.2 or a 0.18. You can start on any brush. You can start on a detailed brush. I started my career out on a detailed brush and just worked up from detailed brushes, and then got the bigger needle and nozzle sizes later on in the career when I needed to get a bit more paint down. So that's why I recommend the Creos 270 for the price with the brush and what you get on it. You get the Mac valve, double action. It's a great brush. The parts are cheap. Is a good beginner's brush to start off with. So we're using this one today. So a double action airbrush is down, and then when you start to move the trigger back, that's when your paint gets released. You move the trigger forward, your paint will stop. Now the best way to paint with an airbrush is keep your air on. You bring your paint in, you take your paint off by rocking it forward, but you're always keeping that air consistently on. And the reason why you keep your air on is so when you're moving forward and backwards on the trigger, you're getting them nice soft transitions with the paint as you're moving in and out with the trigger. If you don't do that and just press down and move back and then take off, you're going to get big splodges and build-ups of paint on the beginnings of your lines. Same with dots, you'll just get big blotches, and you don't want that in your artwork, because in airbrushed artwork it's all soft transitions. You never see any thick build up of like ends of lines and things like that. It's all then nice soft transitions. So another little tip for you when you're a beginner, I guarantee it, I had this happen to me. You can be airbrushing and practicing for ages, and I know someone that's going to be watching the channel and start to giggle now, but you will get finger fatigue, I guarantee it, because you are concentrating that much on what you are doing. You physically want to push the trigger through the brush. You're pressing down that hard on the trigger to concentrate on what you're doing and move back, and to get that movement back in the trigger nice and soft, you tend to press down really hard, and then give it an hour and your finger will end up with a ring on it like that, where you've pressed down really hard on the trigger. So a nice little handy tip if you want to make your trigger a little bit more comfortable, because some of these triggers, they have got like sort of raised edges. Get yourself a little bit of blue tack, drop the blue tack over your trigger like that, and then when you put your finger on the trigger, it makes it a little bit softer and it doesn't dig in, and if you are pressing down, that blue tack goes to the shape of your finger. So that's a nice little handy trick. You can just put that on top of your trigger, makes it a little bit more comfortable. So the first thing you want to start off with when you're a beginner is you're setting your air up. Now air pressures, I always have a ballpark of say 25 psi. That's what I'm running in the brush now, is 25 psi. I've got the Mac valve fully open. And then you're going to move on to your paint. Now, bonus, if you've got airbrush paint, you can drop it straight in and go with your proper airbrush thin paint. If you've got a little bit of thick acrylic, mix it to the consistency of semi-skimmed milk or full fat milk will be good enough. I've got some airbrush acrylic here, so I'm just going to go straight in with the airbrush paint. We've got 25 psi. You move back on the trigger and you can see the paint hitting my hand. So the first sort of exercise that you need to learn is trigger control. You master trigger control and all the other things with the airbrushing will come along in heaps and bounds once you have mastered trigger control. So it's down for air with a double action airbrush, so you're going down for air, and then when you move back for paint, you'll see on this piece of paper here, that's when you get your paint coming out. So you're going down for air, when you move back, you've got your paint, and then rock it forward on the trigger with your air still down. Then you can release. So down for air, start moving back for paint, keep your air on, take the trigger forward, and that will stop your paint. And that's basically the basic trigger control with an airbrush, is to get the paint to flow out nice and then take it off nice. So down for air, back for paint, rock it forward, take your paint off, keep your air on, and you'll create a dot. So just practicing that simple technique, nice and steady, about 4 inches away from the paper, down for air, back for paint, you'll see the paint hit the paper. As soon as you get your dot like that, start bringing it forward, keep your air on, take your paint off, and then you'll get this nice soft dot. If you start practicing that sort of distance, seeing the paint come down, aim to get the nice soft dot, and then you can start moving closer with your brush, doing the same technique, down for air, back for paint. As soon as you see the paint, take the trigger forward and then take your paint, then take your air off, and you'll get the dots. Closer you go, you'll start getting smaller dots, and then before you know it, you'll be moving that trigger like that with the air on. As you can hear, the air's still on, and you're rocking that trigger and you're creating your dots. Once you get your dots down like this, you can start moving on to an exercise on a grid, which is this one here. So just draw yourself a little simple grid out on a piece of paper where you've got little squares, and then you're aiming with your brush to get the dots in the centre of the squares like that. Nice consistent, you'll be keeping the air on, rocking the trigger backwards and forwards to create your dots in the squares. This is a good one for practice because it gives you, the smaller your squares, the smaller the dot. Once you've gone in and filled all the little squares up, you can then go a step further with that technique, go in a little bit closer, and then you can start hitting the crosshairs like that, and hit the crosshairs with your dots. Practice them. This will get your dots down, and it will get your trigger response for moving that trigger back, moving it forward, moving it back, moving it forward, and you're getting these dots. You're going smaller, you're going closer to your work, and it gives you practice for this technique. It's a basic technique, guys, but this will be used in all your artwork. I guarantee it. You'll be doing dots. Pictures are shapes, and you are painting shapes, and you've just got to master how to create them shapes with the airbrush using the on and off technique with the trigger. Now, the next one that everybody has to learn is lines. It's like being back at school. Lines were an absolute nightmare, and lines with an airbrush can be the same for you when you're a beginner. Now, it's the trigger control again, where you are going down for air and you're bringing that paint in when you move that trigger back, keeping that air on, move the trigger back, bring the trigger forward with the air on. So you're going to go air, keep your air on, and then when you come to the first line here, you're going to bring your paint in. As you come up to the second line, you're going to move that trigger forward, take your paint off, and keep your air on. So it sort of looks like this. Like that. The air is continuously on, and then before you know it, you're creating lines like that. And this is what I mean by the trigger. Your air on, bring your paint in, take your paint off, keep your air on. And that's how you'll create nice lines like so, and you'll get nice points to points. And how you achieve the point to point is in the trigger control on bringing that paint, taking the paint on, putting your paint in, so you're coming in nice and slow, moving back, and then taking that trigger forward, keeping your air on, and that will create your point to point on your line. You're just steadying your hand on your easel like that, and you are sliding and moving, and you're doing that trigger response, air on, bringing the paint in, taking the paint off, bringing the paint in, taking the paint off. It's just mastering the down, back, forward, down, back, forward, and then you get to move with the brush as well. So you're doing down, backwards and forwards, and you're moving as well. It's a lot to take in. It's like riding a bike. You always fall off a bike when you're a kid, but you get back on, and then you master it's the steering and the pedaling, and the balance. It's trying to compute and do all them three sort of things at once. And it's the same with an airbrush. You're concentrating on going down, so you're pressing, then you've got to concentrate and go back, forward, as well as move with the brush. You can tend to be very static when you're a newbie and you're pressing really hard down, you're concentrating at the paper, and you go, and you tend to get dots like this for a start, and you tend to lift your finger off like that, and there's big paint build-ups and big splatters because you can't concentrate and do all them things at once. It's hard for your brain to accept to go down, back, forward, up, down, back, forward, move, up, down, forward, back. It's just a lot to take in. You've got to learn the down, then go the back, then the forward. So you learn that, so you instantly can pick the brush up. You've got the memory in your muscles, say muscle memory in your fingers, so you know you're going down, back for paint, forward to take your paint off, but you're keeping your air on, and then you'll start to move with the brush, and then it all just comes together, and before you know it, you are moving with the brush. You can do your dots when you need them, you can shade, you can move, and then it all just becomes one. It takes a lot of time. A lot of people pick airbrushes up, or they see it on videos like this, and they go, yeah, I can do that. That's easy. Pick a brush up, and then drop your comments on this video, and then you'll go, yeah, that guy's right. He knows what he's on about. Because I've done it for a long time, and I was in the same boat as you guys when I started. I was all over the place. I was pressing down, I'd have rings on my finger would kill by the end of the day. But it's practice. It's not something you can just pick up and go, I'm an airbrush artist, I can paint you anything. It takes years of practice, and then to get artwork down, we all as airbrush artists, we all make it look easy on YouTube. You look at these videos and we all make it look easier, is because we've been in the industry a long time. It's like sprayers. I know painters that can paint cars and they dance round cars like you wouldn't believe, and the finishes they get is incredible. But it's everything. It's that practice, it's that years of being in that industry, and things just take time. So you will get there. This is where we all start off, but these basic techniques will help you so much along the way, guys. They really will. I never got taught this. I was like basic, but never shown sort of like in between lines or these squares. I sort of came up with this sort of off my own back, in between the two lines. Like, I'll try that, and it just gives you guidance to look at, and putting the two lines there will make you do your start point and your stop point. That gives you something to aim for, because just doing dots on a screen, on a piece of paper, can be mundane and boring, but when you've got to aim the brush into them little squares, it makes you get that little bit more accuracy. So when you're on a piece of artwork and you've got to do a dot in an eye on a pupil or something like that, or you want to do a little highlight on something, you can aim your brush and you know exactly where that paint's going to come out and hit that piece of paper or that panel. So I hope this video has helped. Drop your comments, guys. We'll get into the talking on this. Hope you're liking the content. Don't forget, if you're new to the channel, click that subscribe, press that notification so you don't miss out on any more up and coming videos on Dred Effects Custom Paint, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.